I'm Marc Stevens, author of Adventures in Legal Land. Website, of course, marcstevens.net. And the radio show, The No Stay Project, which we had the podcast up and running already, and thanks to Calvin for that. But the radio show, The No Stay Project, that I host every Saturday from 4 to 7 Eastern Standard Time, is on lrn.fm and truthfrequencyradio.com. It's also 1 to 4, of course, on Pacific Time, and Sunday morning if you're in Australia and New Zealand. And we're going to be talking about LRN a little more. We're going to talk about Ian Freeman of LRN.fm, and also, of course, the host of Free Talk Live. He also blogs at freekeene.com, and Ian had gotten a speeding ticket, so he's got some information here. Go to freekeene.com to read more about that. But he had filed a motion to dismiss I did some help with, and, presence within the state, the applicability of the code, and he got a response back from a Michael Busol. So it is kind of rare that we get responses back from them. They typically don't. But so this is the paperwork, Michael Busol. So we want to go through this. So if we just take the question that Ian had, though, which is why he contacted me with this information, was that the prosecutor in this is insisting basically that Ian was present within the state because of his physical location. Now, he doesn't use the word physical or geographic here, but it's obvious from the context of the words that he's using. And so the question, how do you do that? When they're insisting that you're present within the state because of your physical location, how do you respond to that? It's actually pretty easy, because what they're doing is they're conflating the geographic with the political. They're equivocating, and they're using the word state as if to mean whatever the hell they want it to mean, until you start bringing it out and challenging them on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring this out. We're going to show how they are equivocating and how to get them to stop doing that. But it doesn't help them out at all. It just makes them dig a deeper hole for themselves. And all we have to do is go based on what we have here. Now, we know that the state of New Hampshire is supposed to be the plaintiff, because I know it's not like a lot of places like Arizona or California where it'll say state of Arizona plaintiff right over here. That's still the state of New Hampshire is the plaintiff. And then, of course, Ian Freeman, or Ian Bernard, as they're calling him here, is the defendant. So let's go through this. So we know right away that the state of New Hampshire is not geographic, at least not geographic only, because it can't appear in court as a plaintiff. So what Mr. Busol, right here, Michael Busol, is doing, he is alleging, and it says CR, so that's criminal. He has to show beyond a reasonable doubt that Ian is within the plaintiff state beyond a reasonable doubt. And he's going to insist, as we go down here, that Ian is subject to the code, of course, and present within the state. So within the plaintiff state. And I believe that when we start, at least in my experience, when you put it that way, when Michael Busol hears, look, sir, are you alleging that I'm present within the plaintiff state? You start to break the equivocating, or when they start conflating, and they're going to start making a distinction. We'll get to that distinction in just a moment. I just want to lay out in Michael Busol's own words that the state is not geographic. Now comes the state of New Hampshire by and through its attorney. Well, that right there settles it. The state objects, stating. Now, we know full well that the state's not doing anything. There is no state. It's a DBA. It is a DBA, nothing more. There's nothing behind the word. So when it says here, of course, state of New Hampshire, that is Michael Busol and the judge. It's a DBA for a bunch of psychopaths who can't provide their services to the community or the society on a voluntary basis, which is something, of course, that Ian and myself do. So to get back, okay, so the state, if it was just the ground, could not object and state anything. So we go a little further down to his argument. Notice he doesn't have any facts. There's no actual facts laid out here. So we go down to his argument where he's just assuming that the code applies. He's assuming that the code applies and that Ian is a person, and that because he's a person under their code, no evidence that applies, that because the code again says within the state, and based on Ian's physical location in Bennington, that must mean he's within the state. No, because we've already established the state's not a geographic area. He further proves it's not a geographic area by going down number 8 here. The state argues. The state argues. And I'll just jump in here. Is valid and beyond dispute? Given that the foregoing, the state argues that the authority to establish and enforce RSA as applied to the instant defendant is valid and beyond dispute. Hello, you've presented no evidence and no witness or personal knowledge your code even applies. So it's not beyond dispute there, tough guy. And I'm sure Ian will hold you to task on that when you get to court. Okay, 2 more points of evidence here. The state respectfully requests, obviously if it was the ground and only the ground, it wouldn't be requesting anything. Respectfully submitted the state of New Hampshire. No, I'm calling foul on that, of course. If geographic area can't do that. However, if Michael Busol is claiming to represent a political body, that's plausible. Well, as far as being able to submit paperwork in the court. So to get back, what happens when you start bringing out that the state can't object, that it can't be, it's not a physical location, what someone like Michael Busol will do in court is they will make a distinction between the plaintiff state and the territory. So what they'll say is, you're within the territorial jurisdiction of the plaintiff state of New Hampshire. But that doesn't help Mr. Busol out at all, because the issue is still, especially since it's criminal, what evidence do you have to show he's within your jurisdiction? What evidence do you have to show that the Constitution and Code apply to Ian? What witness, what personal first-hand knowledge do you have to prove that? And of course, he doesn't have any. But when you bring this out, that the state can't appear in court if it's just the ground, they'll stop equivocating. They'll make a distinction between the territory and the plaintiff state, but that leaves a huge gap in evidence. There's no evidence to connect Ian to the jurisdiction of the plaintiff state. Because if you say, well, you're physically here, we all know, and I've heard on the radio show, I've had on the Call of Shame, when you question them on why you believe that my physical location gives you jurisdiction, all they can do is say that's the way it is, or it just is, or like what I did in Tempe last week, because we said so. That's not evidence. Not evidence. So, again, if you're confronted with something like this, if they're insisting your physical location puts you within the plaintiff state, ask them why. Ask them to prove it. Ask what evidence they have that their Constitution and Code apply. And we've done this in New Hampshire enough times to know that, all right, we know that there's no evidence. But if there's anyone doubting, you will be following this. I'm sure Ian will confront Mr. Busol in court and give us a report on that Mr. Busol, and actually before court, what I would recommend is before giving Mr. Busol, Michael, a call and asking him beforehand, because it's part of discovery. And you'll get the same, anybody can get the same response that I've gotten in the past, because we said so. But I appreciate Ian contacting me about this, and I'm able to help. Hopefully, we were able to confront Mr. Busol, and he'll be able to, like we mentioned on the show last week, just be dumbfounded that he won't have anything. The best he can do is probably just say this is ridiculous. He'll probably make ad hominem attacks against Ian, and bottom line, he won't be able to produce any evidence. So we'll be following this here on freekeene.com and also on my website, markstevens.net.